All right, let's talk about your body's frontline security force, the innate immune system. This is the system that jumps into action the second something goes wrong. We're talking about the system that keeps you alive in those first crucial hours and days of an infection, way before the specialized forces even know there's a fight. So, let's dive in.
Here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by comparing the innate system with its more famous partner, the adaptive system. Then, we'll get into how the innate system is so good at recognizing danger. We'll meet the key cells involved, and then we'll break down its two main strategies, the inflammatory response for things like bacteria and the antiviral defense. And finally, we'll see how it hands off the battle to the adaptive system.
You know, your immune system really has two major branches, and understanding the difference between them is absolutely fundamental. So let's break down exactly what makes the innate system so special and, frankly, so essential.
Okay, this slide is where you see the real trade-offs. The innate system is all about one thing: speed. It's on the scene in minutes. The downside? It's not very specific. It recognizes general danger signals, not a particular bad guy. And it has zero memory. The adaptive system is the total opposite. It's slow, taking days to get going. But it is incredibly specific, and crucially, it remembers. That's why you get immunity to things. The main point here is the innate system holds the fort and contains the problem, while the slow but powerful adaptive system gets ready for battle.
So you might be wondering, if the innate system isn't specific, how does it stop itself from attacking our own healthy cells? Well, it turns out it has a really clever, hardwired strategy for spotting danger, and it doesn't need any practice. The secret is in something called pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMPs for short. Just think of these as universal signatures of microbial life. They're molecular structures that are absolutely essential for microbes to live. But, and this is the key, our own cells don't have them. This makes them the perfect red flags that basically scream, "Intruder!"
And of course, if you've got red flags, you need someone to spot them, right? Well, that's where pattern recognition receptors, or PRRs, come in. Our innate cells are just covered in these things. So if a PAMP is the red flag, the PRR is the sensor that's built to spot that specific flag. When they connect, boom, the alarm sounds.
And this slide gives you a perfect look at what some of those red flags actually are. You've got things like lipopolysaccharide, or LPS, which is part of the outer wall of certain bacteria. Or a really good one is double-stranded RNA, which you almost never find in our cells, but is a dead giveaway that a virus is replicating. These are things that are just fundamentally foreign, making them incredibly safe and reliable targets.
Okay, so we know how the system detects a threat. Now let's meet the cast of characters who actually do the dirty work. These are your first responders, the ones rushing to the scene. First, don't forget the simplest defense, your physical barriers, like your skin. These are your castle walls. But if those get breached, the phagocytes, which literally means eating cells, like neutrophils and macrophages, they're the cleanup crew. They just gobble up the invaders. Then you have dendritic cells. Think of them as the sentinels. They spot the threat and then race off to report it to the adaptive system. And for viruses, you've got natural killer cells, or NK cells, which are programmed to find our own infected cells and take them out.
Okay, let's zoom in on one of the innate system's most powerful and, well, visible reactions: inflammation. This is the main game plan for dealing with threats that are outside ourselves, like most bacteria, and also for just plain old tissue injury.
This picture really tells the whole story at a glance. It starts with an injury, right? A break in the skin lets microbes get in. The sentinel cells that live there, like macrophages, immediately recognize the threat. They start pumping out chemical alarms. These alarms make the local blood vessels leaky and sticky, and they send out a call for backup. This allows a flood of immune cells and proteins to leave the blood and pour into the tissue to fight the infection. Now let's focus on a really critical step in that process. How do you get those backup troops, the white blood cells or leukocytes, off the superhighway of the bloodstream and into the exact spot in the tissue where they're needed? This is no accident. It's a beautifully coordinated four-step process. First, the leukocyte starts to roll along the wall of the blood vessel, kind of like a tumbleweed. Then, chemical signals called chemokines tell it to get serious. This activates powerful glue-like molecules on its surface, called integrans. That leads to step 3, stable adhesion, where the cell just grabs on and stops cold. And finally, it does this amazing thing where it squeezes itself between the cells of the vessel wall and follows that chemokine trail right to the source of the infection.
So, our phagocytes have made it to the battle. Now what? Well, they do what they do best. They eat. It's a process called phagocytosis. You can see it here. The cell membrane literally reaches out and wraps around the microbe, pulling it inside into a little bubble called a phagosome.
Then, that bubble fuses with another one called a lysosome, which is just packed with digestive enzymes and toxic chemicals. It's basically an internal killing chamber. Now, this whole inflammatory process is orchestrated by signaling molecules called cytokines, and two of the master conductors are TNF and IL-1. Locally, right at the site of infection, they drive all the things we just talked about, but they also have effects on your entire body. They send signals to your brain to cause a fever, and to your liver, telling it to start producing special proteins to help in the fight.
So if you're studying for an exam, this is a huge takeaway. TNF and IL-1 are your master regulators. They activate the blood vessels, they cause fever, they talk to the liver, and as we saw, the chemokines are the ones that create that chemical breadcrumb trail for the other cells to follow. If you understand these guys, you understand inflammation.
Okay, but what happens when the enemy isn't floating around in your tissues, but has actually gotten inside your cells? For an intracellular threat like a virus, the innate system needs a totally different playbook. Let's take a look.
See, a virus's whole goal is to hijack your cell's machinery to make more copies of itself. So the alarm has to be triggered from inside the infected cell. And that's where these cytosolic PRRs come in. There's sensors floating around inside the cell specifically designed to detect things like viral DNA or that double-stranded RNA we mentioned earlier. Things that just scream viral infection.
So when one of those internal alarms gets tripped, the infected cell starts producing and pumping out these really potent cytokines called type 1 interferons. Now here's the cool part. They don't just act on the cell that's already infected, they act as a massive warning signal to all the healthy neighboring cells. It's like sending a mass text saying, "Lock your doors, there's a virus on the loose." This puts the neighboring cells into an antiviral state, shutting down their own machinery so the virus can't use them to replicate. It's a brilliant neighborhood watch system.
We've seen the innate system fight bacteria with inflammation and fight viruses with interferons. But you could argue that its most important job of all is what it does next, waking up the adaptive immune system.
This is such a critical concept to grasp. The innate response isn't just about killing microbes right now. All the signals that are generated during this initial fight, the cytokines, the activated dendritic cells, these are the precise alarm calls that are needed to wake up the powerful, but very sleepy, adaptive immune system.
So, the innate system contains the immediate danger, but it also acts as an intelligence officer, telling the adaptive system what kind of enemy it's up against. Which brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? How exactly does this very fast, very general alarm system manage to activate the incredibly precise, tailor-made B and T cells of the adaptive immune response? Well, that is the perfect bridge to the next part of our story.